Welcome to the Multifamily 0 to 1 online meetup, where we discuss the best strategies to get started in apartment syndication.
Thanks everybody for joining us. For the folks who are new here, today we're going to be speaking with Rakesh and going over his experience in multifamily. And the focus here is to get from 0 to 1, meaning how can you get started with syndication? Or if you already started, how can you get to your next one? And how can you be better at syndication? Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that this is an educational presentation and we're not making any investment recommendation. You should always consult with your CPA and attorney for financial and legal advice. So for those who are new here, my name is Marcelo Cazini. My background is in IT and software development. And I'm a local CCIM member here in Houston with all the required CCIM designations. In real estate, I'm a multifamily investor. I also own and operate my own commercial real estate. And prior to multifamily, I was involved with single family fix and flips.
Hello, everybody. My name is Claudia Rubio. I think we all met before, but I was born in Colombia in South America, and I have an architecture degree and asset management experience from managing my own assets in Colombia, and now we are managing our first syndication here in Houston. And I hold a National Apartment Association certification as well.
And I'm an IT security consultant. I have been doing this for over 20 years, almost 25 years. A lot of experience on the business side of things, and now we just started doing multifamily a couple years ago. We closed our first deal in December, and we currently are in around 800 units passively and actively. That's pretty much it.
All right, thanks Martin, thanks Claudia. Rakesh, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you guys for having me. So Rakesh Bansal, I'm based out of Houston. I'm a real estate broker and an investor, started about 14 years ago. My background is IT. I've worked in a corporate America IT background for about 15 years. Now I'm a full-time real estate investor. I have bought and manage about 1,000 doors asset under management, all of it in Texas.
Yes, Rakesh. So let's start at zero. I understand that you had other real estate investments before multifamily, right?
Yes, so let me give you a little background how I got started in real estate. So I came to US on a student visa 20 or so odd years ago to do my master's in electrical engineering. And after graduation, I got into corporate America, started working in IT. But that was not very fulfilling for me. And I always felt I make good money, but I'm not passionate about this job. And also, second factor was, how there's no job security in corporate America. So I always felt I need to build some passive income stream. So the easiest thing and that was approachable at that time, was single family. So I started educating myself in single family space. And I bought my first single family rental in 2006, about 14 years ago. And then I kept educating myself. Over the years, I bought and built a 10 property portfolio. And along the way, I got my realtor's license. And then I upgraded to a broker's license. And also I was flipping single family homes, not a whole lot, but maybe 2 or 3 properties a year while maintaining my IT job. Then I started looking into how to grow my business, take it to the next level. And because I always wanted to get full-time into real estate. I started out as a part-time, but my goal was to get into full-time so I can retire from my corporate job. So about 3 plus years ago, one of my friends introduced me, told me about multifamily, how he got started. So I started looking into how I got studying, and then I ended up partnering with my friend who was sponsoring a deal. Before that, actually, I ended up passively investing in a few deals, trying to learn from other syndicators how they are doing the deals. And then I ended up co-sponsoring a deal with a friend of mine in Dallas. So that's how I got started. That was my first deal in multifamily. About 2.5 years ago, I did that. And then I met another business partner. Him and me partnered, and we got our first solo syndication deal, and that was about 2 years ago. And since then, we've been constantly trying to grow our portfolio. So now we have about 1,000 units asset under management in Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, and El Paso market. And we are looking to grow more this year.
Mm-hmm. So, what is it from multifamily that attracted you the most?
Right. The biggest factor, I think, is the ability to grow at a fast pace, leveraging, like single family. If I have to buy 100 properties, it will probably take me a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 10 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in multifamily, I can do one transaction and buy 100 units.
Yeah.
And in the last 2.5 years, I've managed to build a portfolio of 1,000 units. In single family, that would not have been possible.
Yeah.
Its scalability is the biggest factor, and leveraging people's time. I'm able to hire a management company, manager, and maintenance staff. That is feasible in a multifamily space when you have a large scale operation. A single family would not afford you that flexibility
Yeah.
to grow at a fast pace and be able to outsource these work. In single family, I still manage my properties myself because it doesn't make sense to hire people, and it doesn't really can afford it also on single family. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Rakesh, in that transition from single family to multifamily, you had to learn some new information. You had to develop some new skills. How did you get access to those? Did you get the education yourself, like on your own, or did you join a group, or what do you think was your path, and if there was anyone who could have done it differently?
Right. So yeah, education is key, guys. Biggest fact, one way to educate is to join a group, a guru. Other option is to network with like-minded folks. Go to a lot of these networking events, like one like this that Marcelo and Martins are holding. So I ended up joining one of the multifamily education groups that introduced me to a lot of other folks, where I met people, like-minded people, and I was able to partner with people in whom I met in those group, and able to grow my business and do new deals.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and with that information that you learned from the people you were hanging around with and with the same interests, you went looking for your first property in a specific market, or what was the most important thing for you on that property? The market, the partners?
Right. So when looking at multifamily deals, we have few macroeconomic factors that we are always looking for. The first of it is business friendly state, landlord friendly state. Second is we want population growth, job growth, rent growth. So all these factors, there's several markets all over US that will qualify under that criteria. We being in Texas, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Fort Worth, these are all hyper growth, even Austin, hyper growth markets. So I was looking in these Texas triangle, basically San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas market. And first deal happened to be in the DFW area.
Mm-hmm.
How long did it take you from when you felt you were ready to go look for that first property and until you found it and closed it? How long did that process take?
Yeah, it took me about, I would say, 6-7 months when I felt I need to actively start approaching the buying process. And first deal is difficult, guys, because you would realize that the brokers won't trust you if it's your first deal. So the best way and the easiest way to get into your first deal is by partnering with somebody who has prior experience in this space, who has bought a deal. So that's what I ended up doing. I partnered with a friend of mine, and I co-sponsored the deal, and that was the way I got introduced. And once I got my co-sponsorship done, then I was able to get my second deal as a main sponsor, and that was easily done. I mean, comparatively it was easy because it was my second deal. I could show the broker that I have done a deal before. So that really helps the broker to see proof of execution, because from broker's perspective, it's his reputation at line. He's obligated to the seller, and he wants to find a buyer who can perform, and they don't want to bet on a newbie in the market, right? So performance execution is key to the broker, so they want to see your prior experience.
So during that process between the 0 and the 1, do you consider that the biggest challenge you had was convincing the brokers, or what were your biggest challenges during this time before the
Well, it's a combination of things. Convincing the broker is obviously one big factor. Secondly, on the first deal, because it's your first deal, you don't know what you don't know. So it's a lot of education that goes into it, and you will not be very aggressive, obviously, because it's a very competitive space, as you know, right? We get outbid all the time. You put an offer, you think it's a good offer, but somebody steps in and ends up paying $500,000 more. Then you realize, how did they afford to pay $500,000 and I could not? So the space is so competitive that you have to be a little bit aggressive in your approach. And in your first deal or second deal, it's hard to be aggressive because you're cautious. I mean, we are all cautious in what we do, and we want to play it safe, but you have to be a little bit, you have to get out of your comfort zone a little bit to get your first deal. You know, have to take that leap of faith sometimes. But education comes in handy that time, because you have to take educated guess, educated risk sometimes. So your education, and if you're partnering with somebody who has done it before, that helps you in that space.
So what were the specifics of your first deal? I know you mentioned you co-sponsor with a friend, but how many units, what demographics, and so what were the specifics of that deal?
Sure. It was a 128 unit property in South Dallas, 80s construction, stable property. I think it was about 93% occupancy when we bought it. It was well performing. The area was up and coming. South Dallas had previously, a few years ago, it had a bad reputation, but in the last 3-4 years, South Dallas has been up and coming, seeing a lot of growth in that area. So yeah, we bought it. It was a mid-5 cap property, and there was value add, the rents were still average. We could add about $50 to $75 per unit per month. So which is key for our business model to have a value add proposition left on the deal. And it was a good looking deal, very clean, not much deferred maintenance. So, and we put an offer, and our offer was accepted after a couple of rounds. And from there, we were able to successfully, after we bought it, we have not had any hiccups or anything. It has been going very smooth on that deal.
Good. So we mentioned a couple of things that's important for somebody starting now, but what do you think it's, especially on the environment that we are right now, with what would be what do you think is your best advice for somebody that would be trying to syndicate their first deal within this market that we are?
Right. Yeah, if somebody is 0 to 1, like the theme of this show, you want to partner with somebody. You don't want to go it solo on your first deal, and partner with somebody who your personalities match, because business partnership is like a marriage, right? You want to partner with the right folks where you're able to communicate and understand, you're on the same frequency, and it's going to be usually, our projects are 5-year projects. So if you're partnering with somebody, you're going to be in with them for about 5 years or so, or maybe even more. So you want to find a person you understand, you have similar personalities, and maybe you bring different traits, and add value to each other, right? Like one person might be good in underwriting, other person might be good in marketing. So you add to each other's personalities, you contribute to where the other person is lacking. So you should look for those kind of persons and start partnering. And most important is to find a person who has prior experience for your first deal. and uh, and try to learn from them. Being like, partner with them, and you learn by just by being in their by watching them sometimes, right? By experienced people. And secondly, the one of the advices I got in the beginning is don't focus on small deals. A lot of us, when we are looking at first syndications, we tend to look at smaller deals, 20 units, 10 units. My advice is look at bigger deals, guys. Look at least 50 plus units. Don't go small. It's the same amount of effort you're gonna have to put in syndication, be it 20 units or 120 units. It's the same amount of effort. Through all the hurdles that you have to go through are same. It's just that raising money would be a little bit bigger in the bigger units, but you'll have more scalability, more leverage. You can afford better staff. You can afford better management company, and that's what I'll advise. Go for a bigger size property and partner with somebody you like, you gel with, and that's your 0 to 1 guidance from me.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and I think especially I want to pick up on something you said there. This is typically a 5-year plan, so
Yeah.
you don't want to just pick somebody who you know that has experience that you don't feel like you can get along for at least 5 years.
Correct.
So it's
Correct.
otherwise you'll be in
Very
trouble.
crucial.
Yeah.
Very crucial to partner with the right person, because we have all seen business partnerships go bad, and that's because personalities are different, and you have to have the right personality mix. And basically, the best thing I would advise is when you're looking for a partner, look in the areas where you're lacking, right? Everybody has some strengths, and we all lack in certain areas. So the areas where you lack, that's the kind of person you should look for. Okay, I need a business partner, and ideally, I mean, obviously, they should be experienced, right? Because that's what you're looking for. Second thing is personality traits. They should have some complementing features where you are lacking, and that's their strong point. So you'll make a good business partnership. And third thing is, don't just jump into a partnership. Get to know them before you do that. Meet with them a few times, hang out with them, and see if you guys just get along well. That's very crucial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you want to date before you get married, right?
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Great. So one thing that I know we don't have as much deal flow right now, but if we were to go back in time, 3 to 6 months where we were seeing a lot of deal flows in the market, I think one question we get a lot is how do I keep up with that? How do I go through a full underwriting on every deal that I see? Do you have what do you typically do when you were getting maybe a lot of deals from brokers, and do you have typically a process that you go through,
Right.
or how do you take the first stab at looking at deals as you get them?
Correct. So what you're asking is what is a quick smell test for a deal, right? Because in heydays we used to get 3, 4, 5 deals a day. Not so much right now, but it could be very overwhelming to look at so many deals and to analyze. So first of all, we should define our criterias, right? We have like for me, I've defined Texas as my go-to market. So if a deal comes to me from Phoenix, I don't really, although Phoenix is a hot market, but it's not on my radar, so I pass on it. So if it's in one of the markets that I'm actively looking in, then you want to see how many units is it? Is it too small or too big? So for me, I look for anywhere from 100 to 350 units. So if it's a 600 unit, I will say that right now that's too big of a deal for me. Maybe in 2 years I'll be there to buy a 600 unit. And if it's less than 100, then again I'll pass on it. So again, define your criteria, your market, your property size, and property attributes. Is certain attributes a no for you, then you want to have that ready. If the property passes all those criteria, then it's time to do a deep dive. So my smell test, guys, is what I learned in single family. I kind of correlate to multifamily. In single family, there is a rule of thumb that the rent should be 1% of your purchase price, right? So if you're buying a property for $100,000, your monthly rent should be $1,000 in order for it to be a good investment rental property. So I use that same principle and I leverage it into multifamily space. And over here, because in multifamily, you have higher expenses because of on-site management and stuff. So my rule of thumb, guys, that I use, and not everybody uses, but for me, that's my smell test. The average property rent should be 1.2 times the purchase price per door. So for example, if the property is $100,000 per door, the rent should be at least $1,200 per month. That's my smell test, 1.2% of your purchase price per door. And that's the average rent.
Does the rent or rent plus fees like pet fees, parking, all that?
Yeah. Including that, including other fees, I would say it should be at least 1.2. If it's not there, then you'll have to stretch to make things work, you know.
Do you do some correlation with the rent and the demographics, or do you care about median income at all?
Yes, we do. So median income is important, guys. You wanna at least have 30,000 median income. So let me give you some background. Why is median household income important? First of all, we should look at median, not average, because median is a true reflection, average is skewed number. Median household income is important because let's say an area has $36,000 median household income. That means they have $3,000 per month income. And in multifamily, we are looking for what are our rental criteria, right? So income should be at least 3 times your rent. So if my apartment is, I'm trying to lease it for $1,000, I would expect my tenant and the tenant and his spouse, the family, to make at least $3,000 a month. So that translates into $36,000 per annum median household income. So it is crucial to see the median income in that area and then correspondingly related to your average rent. Can that, and your pro forma actually to be rather, right? Not the existing rent, but your pro forma. You may be planning to bump $100 or $200 in rent because you see that happening, but does the population, the immediate population within a 1 mile radius support that? Can they afford that? So that's where you have to look at median household income. It's pretty important.
Good, yeah, good point.
Those are great key points. So pay attention, everybody, because we've had some feedback from people who want us to talk about underwriting, and this is part of it. This is part of the underwriting process, taking into account all of key points. For me, the median income is very important, and that's the second thing I look after Rakesh said, how big is it and the location, then what's the median income? So that's a very good advice, Rakesh. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, besides that, you know, we look at median income, we look at the rent growth, right? So first thing we look at is a rent growth at a city level, but then you have to drill down into the sub-market level and see what's happening in the sub-market. So if you have a property, let's say in North Houston, then you want to drill down. If Houston has 2% rent growth, that may or may not translate into 2% rent growth for North Houston. So you want to drill down, look at the statistics. What is the average occupancy there? What is the average rent growth there? Because that's what your market is. If rent is growing 5% in South Houston, you're not going to get that 5% in North Houston. Mm-hmm. There is some growth stories happening in different parts of the town, and there are reasons for that. So you want to look at your local, very local data, 1 to 5 mile radius, because that's your immediate tenant base.
For sure.
1 mile, and then you can go out as a 5 mile radius.
Chris, I think you had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Marcelo. Rakesh, early, I'm waiting to see if you would touch on something that you said early about going from 0 to 1, and that is, you said you mentioned that when you're getting started, you take a leap of faith and you do things that are outside your your comfort zone. So I guess with some of the particulars that you're discussing right now, what can you list some examples of what you mean by that? Like what would be outside when you're getting started, what would be outside your comfort zone or
Yeah. So I've seen it, guys, like I said, I have seen it happen where people have to take risks to make a deal work, right? And it may or may not pan out. I'll give you example, right? When I see underwriting from some folks, they'll say that I'm going to put covered parking and I'm going to charge $50 for covered parking. And sometimes, like you get a broker's OM offering memorandum from the broker, and the broker can say whatever in that package. It's our liability and a responsibility to verify and prove that. The broker can say you can put covered parking and you can charge $50. If it's a uneducated buyer, he may just take that broker's statement and use it in his underwriting. But is that doable or not? You have to verify that by doing a local comp analysis. How many comparative properties in the 1 mile radius are actually offering covered parking, and how many of them are charging, and what are they charging? So this is something you have to do. Now, when I say risk, sometimes people take risks by not doing that footwork, right? Going to the comps and verifying that. They just see it on the OM and they'll use that in their underwriting. But that's a risk you're taking. And if you're going to take a risk, at least verify it. Comp analysis is very important. So there are other examples, right? Like let's say you are buying all bills paid property, and the broker in his OM can say you can do rubs on this property and you can get $100 per unit utility bill back. Now, you have to see the unit, the property mix in that submarket, and you have to. I'm a safe guy, guys, and let me take it a step back. I don't want to be the path breaker. Some people say I'm going to lead the path. I'm going to show the world how things are done. I'm not that guy, guys. I don't want to show the world how to take all bills paid property and do the first one to rub back. Let somebody else do it, prove the business model, and then I'm happy to do it. So if somebody's done it in that submarket, then yeah, I will take it and do it. But I won't be the first one. So things like that you have to verify and not just take at literally when somebody's saying that to you. So those are the things I'm saying. You have to take risk, but you have to take educated risk by doing your own due diligence. Yeah. Not everybody does that. And sometimes people have to take risks like just to get a deal done, but don't do that, guys, because do your own due diligence, do all the underwriting that you need to, and if you have comps to support it, then yeah, use that. If your neighbor is charging $50 per covered parking, then go ahead and use that. If they can do it, probably you can do it too.
I would add on the risk side that usually you select your criteria at the beginning, right? Like Rakesh said, you have to set out your criteria, which market, which type of property, which size of property, which median income, all of that. And usually you create that criteria based on your education. So one big red flag for me is if you feel or if you have to step out of your criteria to make the deal work. Like for example, I'm going to look at 100 units or more, and you're looking at a deal that's 90. Okay, you better have a really good explanation that matches your education for taking that risk, because it means that it's a risk different than the one you're educated for. And the same thing if you're
400.
Yeah, you're trying to go after a 250 unit property. Okay, that's a different risk. Are you comfortable taking that risk? And yeah, I think that's another part of when to take risks and when not to take them.
We have a couple of questions. I don't know if I'm gonna go ahead and read, because we love when you guys participate. So Presley wants to ask you, what was your experience finding funding for your deals?
Right. So it gets easier. Every second deal, third deal, fourth deal, it gets easier. First deal, uh, it's a little bit challenging, but we were able to raise all the funds. It took more efforts on our part uh, because we were new, right? If I approach somebody, I'm raising funds and I'm saying this is my first or second deal. Some people may invest with me, and some people may wanna say, okay, let me see how he does with his first or second deal, and then I'll invest with him on his third deal, right? So that's a common human sentiment. You don't wanna that's again risk averseness on the investor side, which is correct. So yeah, it takes a little bit more effort on your first deal, but again, if you partner with somebody who's done it before, then it won't be a challenge. It is doable. People are raising funds all the time, and if you have the right team in place, if you have a good property, you will be able to raise funds. That is I know as a first deal from 0 to 1, that's a big challenge in our mind. How will we raise funds? But the easiest thing to do is to partner with somebody who's done it before, and they'll help you raise the funds.
Yeah, and I would add to that too for folks starting is don't wait until you find a property to go raise funds. You need to make sure that I think finding the property and finding the funds should be a parallel effort, and you start as educating your network so by the time you do find a deal, it's not the first time they hear about multifamily, because then you won't have the time to go through the whole education process to bring new investors. You should be finding investors at the same time you are also finding deals. Would you agree with that, Rakesh?
That's right, Marcelo, because see, all these aspects go parallelly, right? Finding a deal, finding investors, and finding a business partner, right? All these things are happening at the same time. So you want to find a business partner at the same time. You want to keep talking to your investor base that this is what I'm looking at, and what is your investment appetite? If I were to bring you certain deal like this, is this something you would be considering investing in? So you want to get some kind of feedback from your investor base, and that will help you solidify your criteria, guys. That's a feedback for you also, right? Let's say you had certain criteria defined, and in your talks with your investors, when you share that this is what I'm looking at, you may get a different feedback that, no, I'm not interested in a smaller deal, or I'm not interested in smaller markets, or certain feedback you may get. So that will help you redefine your investment criteria. And also, when you find that deal, that will match your investors' appetite, so it will be more easier to raise funds from them.
Yep.
So Rakesh, you just mentioned about the all bills paid for to RUBS conversion, right? So you said like you don't want to lead on to that. So if someone is leading on to that, if someone is doing first time on that sub market, so I guess is it the same criteria where he would see like if I'm doing the RUBS, then it's not increasing the 1/3 of their income if the total rent comes to that, right? I'm saying that would be an indication where this sponsor should look at it while doing the RUBS.
Well, the idea of RUBS is to decrease your expenses and get other income going, right?
Yes.
And it's a good thesis, it's a good idea to do it on paper, but you have to see the local market, how that supports that idea. If most of the properties in that sub-market are all bills paid property, then it kinds of give you an idea that local demographics is looking for all bills paid property. Now, if you are the first one in that market to try doing RUBS, then you're taking an additional risk where you are saying, I'm going to do RUBS, and it'll easily take 1 year to 2 years to implement that, right? Because as your leases are, you cannot do it on your current leases, you'll do it on your new leases as units turn. So it'll take 1 to 2 years to implement that plan. And if you're offering that and there's a less appetite for those kind of properties in that sub-market, then you have shrunk your tenant pool and you'll have a tougher time finding tenants, right? So if that's the case, you may have to drop rents to find those tenants. So there's a lot of interrelated criteria that you have to think about. You have a certain rent, you're gonna keep the same rent and do RUBS, or you're gonna decrease your rent and do RUBS, and how long it will take to implement that process. So When you're first time doing it, you may not have those answers to that information, right? Because you're the first one. It's a lot of trial and experiment, trial and error you might have to go through to implement that. But if somebody's done it, then it's easier for me to look at their experience and model after that. Maybe I can learn from their mistakes and do it differently.
Okay.
So that is the logic behind not trying to do it the first time.
Right. So now I'm saying, like, even if somebody did first time, so he must have looked at the current rent and the spread he has, right? So for example, you told like 1/3 of the income. So for example, take the same where the tenant pool is having a 3,000 monthly income and the current rent is suppose $800. So still you have 200 spread there, right? So that is the one indicator you could take. Okay, if I go to the RUBS, then I could increase the rent a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean,
if someone is doing the first time, so I mean, say, I think these are the things where they look at it, right?
That's one criteria. What you said, one criteria that the tenant base can afford it, because your rent is still below the 1/3 median, so they can afford the RUBS. But then you have to look at the competition in that submarket. Yeah. What's the other people offering, and how do you compare with them?
Yeah, I'll be very concerned, like Rakesh was saying, if every one of your competitors are not doing it, and then you want to be leading the pack, especially if that's your first syndication. I think that would be getting you in a more advanced territory, that because everybody shops for comps. So if a prospect tenant is coming and looking at your property, they may not be able to get into the fact that you're charging 1,000 and the neighbor charges 800, but and one is all bills paid and one is not, so it's going to be a little bit more, a little bit harder as a first-time syndicator to be leading the pack, I think, like Rakesh was saying. But if you have a mix in the area that some are already doing RUBS and some are not, then I think you can probably use some of the metrics when you're doing the rent comps, and you'll be more comfortable that you're not the first one.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example on how it's very deal specific. I saw a deal last year probably where in the area, all properties had RUBS, and that one was the only one still with all bills paid. So your first instinct says, "Oh, that's a great opportunity. I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make RUBS," and then it's been proven it's worked on all of these other properties. But actually, when you looked into the details, that property had really high occupancy because there was a very high demand for all bills paid. So it didn't make sense to convert it into RUBS because you were going to have less interest on that property, and then you're going to compete on the same level with everyone in the same area. You had a strategic advantage. It looks like you're not making as much money, but you have a strategic advantage because you have way more people interested in your product. So it depends. It's very deal specific.
Right. I have a couple of more questions, Rakesh, if you don't mind. You mentioned about the average, the rent, the 1.2% of the per door, right? So that 1.2% you're saying average rent, right? Because it could be a unit mix and it could be multiple bedrooms, right?
Average.
Okay. And because of this COVID situation, so is there any change on the operating reserve, which now the syndicator who is doing the first deal should keep in mind, or still the reserve portion is still the pre-COVID level, only the advice to keep at that level only?
No, guys. So pre-COVID, they were the reserve requirements have gone up post-COVID or during COVID, right? So now the lenders are asking for 9 to 12 months of principal and interest reserve escrow on every deal. So that's an additional burden on a syndicator to raise that much more money. Earlier, that was not there. Earlier, the replacement reserves were about $250, $300 per door. And you had to put 3 months of insurance and 3 months of taxes. Now, on top of what was before pre-COVID, that is still there. 3 months of taxes, 3 months of insurance, $250 to $300 replacement reserves. On top of that, you have to put 9 to 12 months of principal and interest with the lender They'll hold it in an escrow account for up to 1 year. And at that point, they may continue to hold it longer, or they may decide to give it back to you. But it will be held interest free, and it could be on a bigger deal, it could be $1 million. And you have to raise that funds and just let it sit with the lender, and that gives you zero returns. So it impacts your overall returns.
Right. Yeah, so that is basically PITI and reserve, right? So how about the operating expenses? Is there any suggestion to have this much of minimum operating reserve you should have going into the deal right from the day one?
Minimum is 1 month working capital we have, right? When we underwrite, we have 1 month of mortgage payment and 1 month worth of expenses. That's our working capital we have. And on top of that, we always go in with a CapEx budget. It might be held with the lender, or it might be held by myself, but you'll always have a replacement, a CapEx budget and 1 month worth of working capital.
I have an interesting question from Henry Holt. He says, Rakesh, you being a broker and having won deals listed by brokers, are there any other things that you can do as a first-time investor to increase your chances of winning a deal, other than partnering with someone who has experience, as you've mentioned before?
Right. So, like I said, brokers want certainty of execution, and as a first-time buyer, it's hard for you to prove that. Broker will obviously have their doubts whether or not this person can execute. And you can show faith by putting a bigger, non-refundable earnest money, right? So if everybody else is offering 1% earnest money, non-refundable, you can go in and say, guys, I'm going to offer you 5% or 3% non-refundable earnest money to show you how confident I am of executing this deal. So yeah, then the scales will tilt in your favor, because you are offering so much money. Then it shows that you have confidence in yourself. That is something that a lot of people do on their first deals. They offer larger earnest money deposits. So that's something you can do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And from an underwriting perspective, Rakesh, have you had any success stories where you were able to like increasing the revenue or decreasing expenses on the deals that you've looked at?
Yeah, sure. Good question, Marcelo. I'm glad you brought that up. So we bought a property 3 months ago in North Houston. It's called Carriage Place. We have some large 2-bedroom units over there, and we converted them into 3-bedroom units. And they were previously going for $1,000 for 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom townhouse. And we had a pro forma of $1,200 after making it 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. We actually were surprised that over the last month, we have leased 3 of them above our pro forma, 1 at $1,250 and 2 at $1,300. So even during COVID times, where we are hearing a lot of people struggling and stories like that, this is a success story where we are able to actually beat our pro forma. We got $100 more than our pro forma peak COVID times. So we leased 3 units, and we got 2 more ready, converted, done, and they'll be rented at $1,300 as well. So we are beating our pro forma by $100 on that.
How much did it cost you to do each conversion?
We spent about $5,000.
$5,000?
Yes.
And that was adding 1 bathroom and 1 bedroom?
Just the bedroom. Bathrooms are same. It was 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom before. Now it's 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom.
Got it. So just one bedroom. That's good. $5,000.
We had to do some changes. Besides adding the bedroom, we had to open the kitchen a little bit to get a different entrance to it. And we made some other changes, decorative changes. So it ended up costing $5,000.
How about decreasing expenses? Have you been successful doing that into your deals?
Sometimes in some deals, yes. So I have 2 deals in El Paso, and we have recently, yesterday I had my call with my management company, and I got the good news that we were able to negotiate down. So what our El Paso city was charging us $2,000 for trash pickup per month for both our properties in El Paso. I asked my management company to renegotiate that contract because I felt there is room that's too high based on my experience with other properties and looking at talking to other operators. So we renegotiated and we brought it down to 1,300 on one property and 1,500 on another property. So that's a big saving, guys. 6,000 on one property and 8,000 on another property. You know, and we are always looking to evaluate when we buy a property. We look at the existing contract services and we see where we can cut cost, right? So, for example, we bought this deal and the landscaper was charging us $1,500 a month. So after we took over, I asked my management company to shop around and they found a different landscaping company who agreed to do the same amount of work for $1,200 a month. So again, you have to look at all your contract services and shop around, especially if it's a new takeover. You want to see what the previous owner was paying, and then you want to shop around all those services: pest control, landscaping, painting, HVAC maintenance, or any contract services that you have, and even utilities, right? Uh, we signed an agreement. So when we bought our Fort Worth property, we signed an agreement with the utility aggregator, electricity company, and they were able to offer us 2 cents cheaper. The previous owner used to pay like about 7 cents per kilowatt, but we signed a bulk agreement with energy aggregator and he offered us 5.2 and they locked the rate for I think 3 years or something. So you have to look at all the contracts and agreements and try to shop them around. And I have a passion for this, guys. I really want to cut corner is the wrong thing, but save costs. Wherever I can get the same work done with a lesser expensive contract, I would do that. And I really push for it. Whenever I get a bid from somebody, I don't accept the first bid. I always push back. It says, can you do better? And just asking, can you do better, will get you savings, guys. Most people with these 3 words, can you do better? They'll come back and says, okay, I'll take off this much. You know, so I always push back and try to get a discount from our vendors, from our contractors. And they get a lot of business from us, so they're happy to oblige because they know that we have a lot of properties. They're going to continue to get more work from us. So, yeah.
Good. So Rakesh, with the experience you have today, if you were able to look back, what things would you do different on your first deal?
To be honest, Claudia and Martin, our first deal is doing very well. I don't see, you know, I don't have any horror stories or anything to tell you about that deal, and it's going well. We are performing. It's cash flowing very well, so we don't have any bad stories to tell you on that one. Obviously, a lot of people tell you when you ask what would you do differently, they'll say I'll be more aggressive, I'll buy more properties, and who wouldn't, right? But you do what you can at the time with the current information you have, right? So yeah, I mean, everybody has it's first day for everybody at some point, right? So don't be discouraged that somebody started early on, they have a head start. I also started, when I started, I felt I'm behind. There's so many people started before me. I wish I would have started before. But you get there when you get there. I mean, we all try our best, and you are starting today, but you'll get far ahead. Just keep on doing what you're doing, and you'll pass major milestones as when the time is right for you.
Right. And we're getting close to the end, but I would like to ask you this one. What are the deal killers that will make you not pursue a deal?
There's eggs under the...
Okay. One of the things, guys, I like, even in this market where there's a lot of competition and all, I see some folks do deals very aggressively. They are buying deals at sub 5 cap rates. I myself personally feel I wouldn't want to pay anything below 5 cap on a deal. At least 5, that's like the bottom threshold for me. That has to, if it's below 5, I would not even look at the deal. But some people do end up, they'll make it work and okay, but that is one of the criteria for me. I want to be at least, I want to pay at least 5 cap or better deal, not below that. So
Do you have
that's a
any
deal killer for me.
Do you have any proper characteristics that you would avoid as a deal killer, like a boiler, or a
Yeah.
certain age of the property, or is there any characteristics of the deal that would make you avoid flat roofs or?
Yeah, good point. So I try to stay away from older than 1970s properties. 70s as is like 50 years old. Think of it, right? If a 1970 property is 50 years old today, that's very old. So I stay away from 60s and 50s properties. And I have one property which is a chiller, and it's a pain in the butt, guys. Chillers are always breaking down. There's always water leaks. So given a choice, I would try to stay away from chiller properties. But it's not a dead rule for me. If the deal's really good, I'd still consider it. But that's what it gives a lot of maintenance issues on a chiller properties, especially underground plumbing. You have a lot of leaks on that, and every couple of months you'll have a leak. And I've seen that, and as other operators say the same thing. A lot of people stay away from chillers just because of this constant maintenance issues. But it's not a deal killer, guys. If it's a deal is good, and let's say they have a new chiller or a fairly new chiller, less than 5 years old, then I would consider it.
Yeah. Just a quick question, Claudia, sorry. Rakesh, because you brought up that cap rate that you don't want to go below 5. So what should be, say for the first time syndicator, say just to have a look, like what should be the difference in basis points between the cost of the capital and the cap rate if you're looking at the deal?
Cost of capital, what do you mean by that?
Cost of, the loan, the mortgage, right? So if you're
mortgage,
yeah.
Okay. To be honest, I don't have a thumb rule on that, but looking at today's market, I think you should have at least 1.5 points difference between your acquisition cap rate and the loan interest rate,
Okay.
Yeah.
There is a question from Harry here that if you try to pay down the mortgage faster.
In our world, we try to get maximum years of interest only. It helps us with better cash flow and better returns for our investors. Paying down the mortgage faster means you could do it if it's your personal deal, but when we do syndicated deals, we have multiple investors. We are all looking at that cash flow and quarterly income. So in order to afford that, we need to have 3 years, 4 years of interest only, and we don't want to pay mortgage down because our business is 5-year hold and then sell. So we want a cash flow during that 5-year period and then sell it for maximum profit. Paying down loan is not a criteria for us.
Yep, good point. Yeah, I think one of the difference from a single family to a multifamily is that you do try to, when you're getting the mortgage, something called interest only, is trying to get as much of interest only as you can. So sometimes you can get 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So you definitely don't look into paying down the mortgage any faster than you have to.
Every dollar that you have from the bank working is making you money. So you don't wanna pay it until you have to.
Mm-hmm. Right. The logic. See what you said. I'll just add to that. Why do you want to pay a loan down? A loan is costing you 3%, 3.5% in today's market. Instead of paying down the loan, why don't you use the cash flow to buy something else that can make you 12, 15, 18%? So that's a better utilization of your capital to invest in a new project than to pay down your existing loan, which will get you only 3 or 3.5%.
Yep, for sure.
That is part of the mindset change.
Yes.
That you start, like things that you start understanding when you start this kind of real estate investment, changing that mindset from single families and the old way of thinking about financing and loans and buying and making the money work for you.
Right. That's right.
So Rakesh, do you have any tool or system or book or podcast that you would recommend for somebody starting now?
There are a lot of good podcasts out there. I used to, and I still do. I listen to Old Capital podcast. That's pretty good. And nowadays, Marcelo and Rubio, you guys are doing a good job of bringing. See, this is a good event, guys. It's an intimate group, 20 people or so. We can all ask questions, and you can participate on all these calls and ask operators like myself how they got started, and you can learn from our experience and leverage that experience for your benefit. So these are the things you have to do. Just Facebook has a lot of multifamily focused groups. Join those groups. You'll see a ton of information being shared. I learn a lot. I learn a lot because we have lawyers, we have CPAs, we have operators, we have lenders on those multifamily groups, and they're all sharing news information of COVID related or grants related or the new programs, rent relief programs. So I'm constantly learning. I go to those Facebook groups on a regular basis and I see what's the post, and I listen to the podcast like yourself, Old Capital, and there are many more good podcasts out there.
All right, thanks, Rakesh. Anybody has any other questions before we get closing? All right, so let me go ahead and just talk about our next meeting. So for the folks who are new here, so we always meet on the first and third Wednesday of every month. So today is the first Wednesday, so our focus is for syndicators. And then on the third Wednesday, our focus is how to get better as a passive investor. And also I would say that if you are really just trying to be a syndicator, that's also a great meeting for you, because that's where you get to learn what's important for a passive investor and what they're looking for. So when you are approaching them, you know that you're approaching them with the items that they're looking for. So our next meeting, July 15, passive investors, and then August 5th, we go back to our syndicator meeting. So with that, I want to share again Rakesh's contact information. Rakesh, we really appreciate the time that you met with us. I think if anybody's looking for more information from Rakesh, Rakesh, can they contact you on that email address?
Yes, feel free to email me or send me a Facebook friend request. Just find me by my name, and we're happy to connect through Facebook or email, and happy to share, and guys, don't hesitate in approaching people. I mean, everybody is happy to help and share their experience, and if you can help another person be more successful, then it'll be our pleasure. It's just our way of giving back, and I'll be happy to continue that cycle. Marcelo, Rubio, thank you. You guys are doing a great job of helping the community learn and grow, and this is a great forum that you have put together, and it's really nice. I appreciate what you guys are doing and for having me on this meetup today.
For sure, yeah.
We are grateful and we appreciate you, Rakesh. You gave us a lot of information, a lot of good content.
Thank you for watching this week's episode of the Multifamily 0 to 1 Meetup. Join us live the first and third Wednesday of every month.